Hi, everyone, and welcome to our afternoon session for today, Thursday, July 11th. This is our final session together. Aside from the final presentations, this is the last time that we're meeting together as a group, and I am sad about that. I have really enjoyed our time together. I know we'll be together asynchronously in the class and so on, but still, it's a little sad. Yesterday we were talking about feedback. That's where we left off. Specifically workload management issues related to feedback, because feedback is a huge part of our job. When we are teaching and trying to help students learn, it involves a lot of feedback. So we're going to look at in more detail how to think about feedback in ways that will help us reduce our workload while still maintaining the integrity, the quality of our course materials and our overall objectives. And then we'll talk a little bit about the final project, just a few updates, and then we're looking to have a wonderful another guest speaker to talk to us about the student perspective again about learning languages. So that's kind of our general schedule. Is everybody okay with that? Thumbs up. Today is an hour and a half session, hour and a half. All right, wonderful. All right. I am roughly there. Everybody organizes information differently. Okay. So this is not like, you're not going to find textbooks that organize the concept of feedback into these three areas. It's the way I'm organizing it so that I can hopefully be a little coherent when we're talking about this subject. So we're going to talk about feedback effort, and as it relates to learning, the value of the learning objectives and the timing in the learning cycle. And then we'll talk about feedback effort and specific time-saving strategies like rubrics and boilerplate text and so on. And then we'll look at some specific technology issues related to feedback. All of these ideas with the end goal of providing feedback to help the learners, but doing it in ways that don't make us feel like we're spending more time than yields value, I guess. All right. So first, we'll talk about feedback effort, learning objective value, and timing in the cycle. So I'm going to minimize this and just keep this up in the corner for you to be able to see. By the way, feel free to doodle on the whiteboard, add your thoughts, or in the chat, whatever. When I'm talking about feedback effort and learning objective value, what I'm talking about here is that in our course designs, we should have we've identified learning objectives, okay? And honestly, those learning objectives in the backward design format that we used like in week 3, they should be identified as critical or must know objectives and nice to know objectives or nice to be able to do. And then finally, like,
You said doodle, so I did, and then I erased it. So you should have a backwards button.
It's totally fine. Yeah, the trash can or erase button will erase the whole slide just to give you but back button is totally fine. It works well. Anyway, So the different types of objectives, there are different values to those objectives. Some of them will be critical. Like if the students get nothing else from this course, they will learn X, Y, and Z. And then you'll have those nice to know, like, oh, and I also want to include these things. And then finally you'll have, ooh, and if we have time objectives. Okay. So you should, in your mind, be very clear to yourself on which of the learning objectives in your course, in your unit, in your year-long class, which of them are must know critical objectives, which are nice to know, and which are just like, oh, if we have time. Because you want to spend the most feedback effort on the critical objectives. And then you don't want to be spending a lot of effort on those nice, on the, oh, if we have time objectives. Okay. So your feedback effort should be guided by the value of the individual learning objectives, the activities and the assignments and so on related to those objectives. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? The effort based on your effort based on the value of the learning objectives and the assignments associated with them. Okay. The next thing, okay. In our classes, we will have an objective like, oh, understand, can write basic sentences, right? I mean, that's a fairly standard critical objective. Like the students need to be able to do this by the time they finish the class. But you also might have objectives like, oh, I hope the students learn the difference between X and Y grammar issues. Maybe it's a finer point, an interesting point to you, but it's not critical. It's not the most important learning objective or one of the most important learning objectives in the class. So you'd want to spend more time providing feedback to students on the critical objectives and less time providing feedback on the not so critical objectives. This is part of the backward design process that we went through in week 3, where you identified learning objectives and you identified the criticality of the learning objectives, because that criticality impacts every bit of your course design, how much time and effort you're spending, how many activities and resources are being used, and so on, how much feedback you're providing, with the idea that you might have a lot of objectives in your class, but each of them are more or less important. Okay. So that's one way to think about your objectives is, one way to think about your feedback efforts is aligning your feedback efforts with the value of the objectives. More high value objectives, more feedback time. Less valuable objectives, less feedback time. And each of you, when you're designing your courses, should have in mind which of your objectives are critical and which are just nice to know, and which are if you have time, or however you want to think about those. Another thing that you should be thinking about when you're deciding how much effort to put into your feedback is the timing. So we have initial practice of a concept, and then we have the second practice opportunity, second and third practice opportunities. These are both formative assessment in the cycle, in the learning cycle. They're formative assessment options because they're still learning, they're still forming their understanding. And then finally, you have the final assessment, the final, the integrated performance assessment, or the final, or the summative. And I spelled that wrong. The summative assessment. So for each lesson, for each new concept, or set of concepts, grammar skills, vocabulary, cultural concepts, etc., you'll have the initial introduction of that activity with the students practicing, and you're formatively assessing them. And then you will have subsequent practice activities with more assessment, leading towards a final demonstration of that particular concept or skill or set of concepts and skills. You should spend more time providing feedback in the formative assessment, the initial and the second and subsequent practices, because the students are still in the part of the learning cycle where they can take your feedback and do something with it to improve their learning. By the time they get to this summative assessment, and there's no more opportunity for them to revise again and continue to use your feedback in some way to improve, then you should be spending less time at this point on the assessment. So when they're learning, you're giving them more feedback to help them learn. And then by the time they demonstrate their learning, this is where the least amount of your feedback will come into play, because there's nowhere else for them to take it. I mean, you give them feedback, what do they do with it? And that should always be in the back of your mind. I'm giving them feedback. They're supposed to be doing something with this feedback. If there's nothing more for them to do with the feedback, then don't spend time on that. Does that make sense? Yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay. Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah. So this is just your initial pass. When you are coming up with your facilitation plan, right? Week 5, this is all about thinking about facilitation. And a big part of your facilitation plan is when you are going to give feedback, on what will you be giving feedback? How will you be giving that feedback? How much time will you be spending giving that feedback? Your first thoughts when you're planning that are, what's the value of this objective or these objectives in this lesson unit that I'm working on? And how much time should I be spending on that based on its value? And then, is it a formative or a summative assessment? Are they still learning? Can they still do something with my feedback? If so, then more feedback would be great. If they can't, then you don't need to be using your efforts on something that they can't do anything with. All right. So that is the first thought about that. Oops. Now, let's move over to time-saving tips and strategies. Now that you've imagined and answered those questions for yourself about the value of the learning objective, the assignments related to that learning objective, and the timing, was it formative or summative, and how much in general you should be spending. Now we want to look at, well, great, I'm definitely going to be giving feedback on this particular activity. How can I save time? How can I make my feedback super effective, but also efficient, right? So one way to do that is rubrics. Rubrics, but not just any old rubrics, rubrics that are very carefully designed with lots of detail in the descriptors. And for those of you who are not familiar with rubrics, a rubric looks like a table, an analytic rubric looks like a table where across the top you have the levels of performance, like excellent, good, poor, or outstanding, average, below average. These are levels of performance. So across the top, right? And then down the side, you have criterion 1 and criterion 2. This could be anything from proper use of vocabulary to clear grammar structures to whatever it is that you're assessing each criteria. And then for a performance level, for an outstanding performance level, you have a descriptor for the high performance level, and then another descriptor for the medium performance level, or however many levels you have. And those descriptors, they describe in detail what this criteria looks at a specific level of performance. And when you fill those rubrics in really nicely with a lot of detail, then you can use that rubric, and instead of writing out that descriptor information every time, you just use the rubric and say, on this criteria, you got this level. On this criteria, you got another level. On this criterion, you got another level, and so on. So you can use rubrics to help you save time. All right. Now, rubric design is a whole nother huge area of study. There's lots of things that go into rubric design, but I can certainly share with you some resources. If you're interested, just give me a thumbs up or a yes. And if I see that, I will make sure to send you information for your own benefit. Okay. Rubrics. I'm adding that to my list. Ranging. All right. So that's one way to save time. Another way to save time is boilerplate text. All right, you've all been in situations where you feel like you're making the same comment over and over and over again. Every time you read a student's paper or you're marking one of their activities or assignments, whether it be a worksheet or a paragraph or a project, and you seem to be making the same comments over and over and over again. Instead of typing them out every single time, and you don't want to use a rubric, you could use boilerplate text. Now, everybody does this differently. Some people have a document where all of their usual comments that they make are written, and they just copy and paste. So if they're always saying something like, you put this adverbial phrase in the wrong spot. It should, to sound more natural, come at the beginning of the sentence, not at the end of the sentence. If you have to type that 20 times, that's inefficient. So, but if you have that phrase on a piece of paper and you can copy paste it into the assignment, then you've just saved yourself a lot of time. Alternatively, if you're for those of you who are doing any kind of grading in like Microsoft Word or Apple Pages or pretty much any Word document editor, there is the autocorrect feature. You're familiar with autocorrect? This is the thing that in Microsoft Word, for example, when you accidentally type TEH, it automatically corrects to THE. Is everybody familiar with that? Give me a thumbs up. The autocorrect feature. I mean, I don't think you can type anywhere these days. Your phone, your in your Microsoft Office, in your Apple Pages, etc. Well, you can add to that autocorrect library. It's in your settings. You could tell it, hey, autocorrect, every time I type adverbial phrase, anytime I type AP, please autocorrect it to include this adverbial phrase, blah, 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 whatever sentence or paragraph or entire page of information. And it will automatically just slot it into wherever your cursor is when you're providing that feedback. So you don't have to type it over and over and over again. So this is a really great way for you to take advantage of your knowledge of your students, because you know after teaching that class a second, a third, a fourth time, exactly the comments that you always end up making. So you can do it like this using technology. Is that a good tip? Good tip? Helpful? Yay? Nay? Has anybody ever tried doing something like this? Yay. All right. Another thing you can do in those situations where you find yourself saying the same thing over and over and over again is, instead of saying it to individuals, say it to the group. You've seen this happen. You get a bunch of assignments turned in to you, however they're being turned in, and you notice that the same errors are creeping up in the majority of your students. Instead of providing the feedback to each individual student one by one, send out a group notice or give a group feedback and say, hey, class, I noticed that here is where we are still having difficulties. Let's look at this more. Let's explore this further. Let's do some revision and figure out how to improve in this area. So group or individual thinking about whether to send out individual feedback or group feedback can be a good time-saving strategy. And then finally, you can think about whether you're going to use peer feedback. There are instances where peer feedback can be quite useful. And not only can it be useful in saving you time, but if you're asking the students to look at a rubric and provide each other with feedback based on that rubric, they are internalizing the criteria that you are looking for while they are providing feedback to somewhere else. So not only does it improve the student whom they're giving feedback to, it also improves their own work through the process of providing that feedback. So you can rely on peer feedback, and that is an excellent teaching strategy, an excellent learning strategy, an excellent time-saving tip. There are caveats to all of these, of course. Training needs to happen. You need to help students figure out how to give and receive feedback effectively to one another. Otherwise, depending on the age level you're working with, chaos can ensue. But in general, you can help students do some really good peer feedback, and the benefits to their learning will be drastically improved. All right, now I'm going to stop for a second. Everybody, you can click on the little T, for example, and click on the screen, type a tip. Or if you don't feel comfortable working on the whiteboard, go ahead and type it in the chat, but give a time-saving tip for feedback. Or if you want to use your voice.
Bethany, and you're not paying attention to that, then I even drew a line, a random line towards it to draw.
I missed it. I missed something. I'm sorry. It wasn't that I wasn't paying attention. I just don't see what you're talking about.
No, no, I said I typed something on the screen.
I missed
It's
it.
Oh, it's still there.
Where is it?
It's in the corner.
Oh, see, that was outside of my field of view because I was several things over. Does Google Docs have, that's a very good question. Let me look. Tools, spelling and grammar. Personal dictionary. Yes, it's called the personal dictionary. It's under tools, spelling and grammar. Personal dictionary. Okay. So that is related to that autocorrect, you guys, autocorrect. So Google Docs does have it as well. And you can experiment with that.
Also, Bethany, oh, now I see. Oh, I found the eraser. Okay. Oh, it doesn't work. The eraser doesn't work. Huh. Where's the eraser that works?
I'm not sure, but if you're talking about the Google Docs question, it's off screen, so you don't have to worry about it. Tips. Crystal, any tips for us? Since nobody's offered, I'm going to call on people. Crystal, a feedback tip. You're muted if you're talking. Okay, go ahead and type it in the chat. And while you're typing, Jamil, a feedback tip for us?
Yes, of course. I mean, we do autocorrect. Definitely, this is helpful because we have our, how you call it, the blind spot in our vision. And sometimes we skip something very important. So just to double check, usually, thanks to God, I say my correction is 0 because I have everything good, well done. I have a good command and a grammar in both languages now, talking English or Arabic English. But I don't want to show off on it. Believe me, I use it just to double check. As I said, we are human and we do that a lot. About the feedback effort, we spoke about it, and I told you every single semester we have a feedback from the students. Okay, in the beginning, some peer comes and we call it a class observation. I don't know if you use the same terminology. And after class observation, definitely we interchange some point of view, how to do it better, how to do it, etc., etc. So on the term as now, we every single semester, as I told you, we have different kind of students, different environment, more, less technology. No, definitely more technology. So we ask the students feedback and to see how is that going on. But only beside all that, these are my tips for now. Still, I'm driving and it's pouring here in Miami, Bethany. Can you believe it?
I'm sorry. Well,
It's pouring, unbelievable. However, I have one question. I'm knowledgeable on all what you have here, but I'm sorry if you can repeat for me this term boilerplate text.
yes.
I'm not too familiar with it. Can you give me? I'm sorry to make you repeat that, but
No.
really, I'm not familiar with that.
it
If
just,
possible, I know what is template, but I don't know if this is the same or no.
yeah,
Yes,
it's two different ways. So boilerplate text is just, I mean, this is a phrase meaning text that gets used frequently. In our context, it would be the comment that you keep making over and over and over on student work. And so like when you're looking at student writing and maybe you notice that every single student is using the wrong word in a particular context. And so every student paper, you're like, oh, this is great writing, except you've misused this word. This word actually means blah, blah, blah. So boilerplate text would be, you have a copy of that phrase that you're always typing to every student, and you could just copy and paste it onto the student work as your comment. So you're saving time by not typing it over and over and over. Instead, you're copy pasting it or using autocorrect to insert it instead of typing the same
and
lengthy
this is,
phrase over
sorry,
and over and over again.
yeah, you mean of the same assignment is like feedback to the student, okay?
Yeah.
Like that?
Yeah.
Okay. I like it. Boilerplate. I want to add it to my vocabulary now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bethany. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay.
Okay. Vivian, a tip.
Okay, the tip of what? The feedback?
For feedback, time-saving tip or just a general tip on feedback?
Yeah, talking about the feedback, we don't have, since it's a Saturday school, we do not have really kind of standard, process in place. So basically, sometimes, the parents and students, you can see their eyes lighting up in the class. So
Mhm.
parents send a nice email, nice card, to you, or when we're talking, first time, we can just like a not very formal way, to get their feedback. But somehow, still learning, right? We're learning by doing. So we did learn like somehow we do need to put the student centered approach. That's why like every time when we plan the class, for example, the unit, the lessons, we always want to have some videos, like a multi-channel, to make sure the student kind of engaged, right? Cannot pure like Chinese, version. It's very hard for them to understand, but we do like have certain English, but some Chinese, blend in that type of thing. Yeah. So the whole point is, we helping them to learn, but also we don't want to overkill them, like so hard and so boring. They don't want to come back even, right? So, yeah, but the feedback, it's important, that's very true. So somehow we also got some feedback. For example, one time I remember that a while ago, we're talking about some, like I think it's a shanzi, right? The fan, the Chinese style fan. Yeah, this type of thing. Then one parent just say, hey, can you just next time bring some real thing, fan? Oh, Maobi, some, the Chinese style kind of, you can to do your calligraphic, writing.
Mhm.
Yeah, the real thing to show them, or 筷子, chopsticks. Yeah, because our students kind of bilingual, most of them non-Chinese heritage. Yeah, so that's a kind of good to learn, right? Certainly we learn from parents as well. From sometimes we learn even from our students, Gen Z, right? So yeah, so it's interesting. So yeah, I feel like feedback very important. Sometimes though I do give them constructive feedback as well, right? For example, please do not do your homework like in the class, right? I know you are busy middle schoolers, but yeah, please pay attention to the class, right? Yeah, something like that. So I think it's just a good way to know each other better, and find a like a user-centric type of design and also teaching style. Yeah,
Thank
both
you.
ways. Yeah, two ways. Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to read
Oh,
Crystal's statement here in the chat. Just a second. Ask students for their preference before you provide any feedback is essential. Always highlight what they did well on before any suggestions so you can motivate your students. Sandwich the feedback. Pros, cons, and pros is wonderful. Yes, those are all great strategies.
can I share mine?
Yeah, 1 second. Hold on 1 second. Students, whenever you're giving feedback, whenever you're giving corrective feedback to help, whenever you're helping learners learn things more deeply, right? You're giving a lot of feedback, and but we're all human. We hear and read, specifically written feedback, differently, right? And written feedback is really easy to misunderstand. Some students will hear super critical feedback when you meant for it to be supportive feedback. And so asking students, how do you want to receive feedback? What's helpful to you, blah, 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 is a really good strategy to help avoid those situations. And then sandwiching your, making sure that your feedback includes what they did well as what they need to improve, because a lot of research really clearly indicates that the best learners are equally adept at knowing what they're doing well and what they need to improve. Okay. Learners who are really super self-critical and can't identify what they're doing well cannot improve. Learners who identify that they're doing everything well and don't have any idea of what they're not doing well, they also won't improve. They have to know both. And so you helping them by identifying, you did this well, you need to work on this. That's very important. Thank you, Crystal. Wendy, let me see. Now, who did I ask to wait? Go ahead.
Weiyin.
Wenying, please go ahead.
I'm considering using AI like ChatGPT to help me give feedback to my students' essays. I spend a lot of time reading their essays and providing written feedback every semester because they have written assignments every other week.
Mhm.
So it's quite time consuming. Okay, so I'm thinking about using AI. I don't know whether it's good or not. Please tell me. Okay, so copy paste my students' writings to ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to give feedback, and then copy paste ChatGPT's feedback to okay, to the place where my students had their typed right essay. Do you think that's a good idea? Okay, this is option 1 and option 2. Option 2, I will have my students write first the draft and then submit it to me. After probably 3 days, I will have them do the same thing as I did. They copy their writing to ChatGPT and they go to look for feedback from ChatGPT. It's like self-study, and I do not have to do that for them. Okay, that's option 2. So I'm considering the 2 options. Which one do you think better? Any such suggestions?
My suggestion is to try them both, because within your context, with your specific students, one way might work better than another, and I won't know. But if you try both of them and see how they go, like first half of the semester, do one way, second half of the semester, do the other way, or alternate activities, and see what works out best and what yields the results that you're hoping for. That would be my suggestion, is to try them both. Both of those ideas sound great, but only you will be able to tell which one works better for your students within that context. I'm not trying to cheat my way out of answering that question. That's truly what I believe. I'm a big experimenter. Try both. If you have two ideas, try them both. See what works the best.
Okay.
My caveat with AI that I will just reiterate again and again, everything you submit to AI, like if you're submitting student papers to AI and asking them to, and that is a great time-saving strategy, by the way, you give a bunch of papers, your students' writing samples to AI, you upload them and you say, analyze these and tell me what the top 3 weak areas are across all of these papers. AI can do that in just a few seconds, something that would take you hours to do. So that's a great way to use AI for reducing your workload, your feedback, because you can find the weak areas and address them. But that being said, everything you upload to AI, if you don't change the privacy settings, that all gets added to the AI database. And so if you have concerns about intellectual property and copyright, then you need to make sure to change those settings. And more specifically, if you ask students to use AI, you need to tell the students about this so that they can protect their privacy, their intellectual property, etc. And I know at the younger ages, this isn't as much of an issue, but at the older ages, it certainly is. Okay. Who else wants to give a tip? A tip. All right. I'm going to talk about one more thing. Feedback and technology, since we were just talking about AI, right? Feedback and technology. Figure out, so the lower level of Bloom's taxonomy, right? The recall, that's in the definitions, this is very low levels of understanding. These are things that you could do automated feedback, quizzes or activities or stuff using technology that when the students input the answer, they get automatic feedback. Did they get it right? Did they get it wrong? Right? Very simple lower level stuff. Now we looked at the wonderful example of the workbook, the Chinese workbook. That is a very excellent example of automated feedback on practice assignments. It's critical feedback. And if you can automate it, especially at those lower levels, you should do it and save your valuable time as an educator giving feedback on the more nuanced and subtle things and the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Okay. So automated feedback or versus manual, when you can do automated, but it shouldn't all be automated because ideally your classes should be aiming for higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy, you know, the create, analyze, apply, those levels. And then the types of feedback. When might audio or video be a better option than text feedback? For example, I do a lot of video feedback where I do a screen share. I record myself looking at a student's paper, highlighting things, marking it up, and talking through that as if they were standing next to me so they can see the video and they can see what I'm marking up and the feedback I'm giving it. And more importantly, they can hear it. And from an emotional standpoint, especially for those students who tend to hear things more critically than what you intended, this avoids those kind of problems because they can hear your feedback, they can hear your corrections and your recommendations in the tone which you meant, which is supportive and thoughtful and constructive and not mean. You know, I students, I'm sure all of you have heard or at least in the background, students saying, oh, she's so mean or he's so mean. Anyway, so feedback. You know what? Zoom works really great for that. You just do a screen share, you hit record, right? You have your screen sharing the student's paper, and then you just highlight things and start recording. But if you don't like that, there's a tool that used to be called Screencast-O-Matic, which is now called something else. There are many video tools, but Zoom, since everybody has it, is easy breezy to use. Okay. All right, so all of these are aimed at helping you provide corrective feedback to your students and also positive comments about what they're doing well on. Both types of feedback are very important. So strategies for doing that to maintain the quality of the learning while reducing your workload. This is, I think, for me, a really big deal because I think teachers are overworked and underpaid. And the more help that I can give you, or, you know, tips and strategies that we can provide each other with how to spend less time giving more and better feedback, I think the better off that we all are. Okay. So that's why we focused on this. That, and please read module 5.3, which has a lot of information on feedback strategies, how to provide corrective feedback, how to tell students what they're doing well, what they aren't doing well, how to be specific and measurable with your feedback. There's a lot of stuff in the readings that I hope you look at. All right. We went into, in the morning session, we didn't have a guest speaker. So we were able to go over this in more detail. And if you want, you can also look at the recording from the morning session when I post it to get some better, more ideas about feedback. Okay. But that's where we're going to stop on feedback now. And we're going to talk about a few other things. Okay. Final project presentation schedule. Everybody voted on the final project, when you're going to present your final projects. And the majority went for Thursday, July 25th, starting at 2 p.m. All right. I am going to share this document with you so that you can sign up for a time slot. You have to be there for the entire time. So technically, it doesn't really matter, but they're in 10-minute slots because your presentation should be about 7 to 10 minutes. Okay. So you can sign up for a time slot. Now I'm offering a second session because we have definitely 3 people, possibly 1 or 2 more, who can only meet in the evening on July 25th. So I have already put 3 names here, but we have a couple more slots. Again, I will send out this document. I will share it with you in an email so everybody has equal opportunity to sign up for a time slot during that frame. Okay. My question to you, does anybody see a problem with attending one of these 2 sessions? Does that look okay for everybody? Yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down, something in the chat. Okay. After this session, I will be sending out an email with the link to this document so you can go in and sign up. All right. Notice it's like Thursday, July 25th. So you will have the bulk of, this is week 7, right? You'll have the bulk of week 7 to do your final presentations. And if you need help on preparing your final presentation, or you need help with your final project that you're working on the rest of this week and all of next week with your peers, just reach out to me. If you want to meet with me as an individual or as a team and get some support, get some feedback, anything like that, please do reach out. I am here for you to help you. And while we're not meeting as a group next week, I can meet with individuals or teams. All you have to do is email or call me and we can set up a time. Everybody good with that? Yay, nay? Everybody understand? Wonderful. All right. One more thought about week 6. Next week is week 6. You're going to be working with 1 or 2 other people or 3 other people in some cases to give and receive feedback and to finalize your projects. Week 6 is all about taking all of the information from weeks 1 through 5, synthesizing it along with your readings and your new understandings and your discussions with your peers and so on, and using all of that information to complete this lesson plan unit. This is kind of like the last step before you submit your lesson to Start Talk Create, right? You have to submit your lesson to Start Talk Create as part of your final project. So this is that last step. You're consolidating all your information, filling out this table about the title and the description and so on. Talking about your lessons, activities that you're doing. Remember, you have to have a minimum of 2 of something that you address the learning objectives formatively, i.e. they're practicing and getting feedback from you, and then the final assessment, the integrated performance assessment. So you fill out that information. And then the lesson 2, so there's 2 lessons that you can assess, 2 activities, if you like that word better. And in the right-hand column, this is where you should be putting any questions that you want the people providing you feedback to help guide them on what kind of feedback you're looking for, in addition to the general comments about, is this aligned? Is this engaging? Is this whatever? So for example, you might have an idea for a formative assessment, like automated quiz or something. We'll just put that, right? You might have automated quiz, but you might in your notes say, I'm not keen on this idea. Do you have suggestions? That way, whoever's providing you with feedback will see this and go, oh, okay, I can really give some help in this area. I can provide some feedback, some suggestions for an activity, for a learning experience, for whatever. Is that clear?
Oh, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
So do you want us to put everything in this table for week 6 final project?
Yes.
Or do you want us to upload this table to Start Talk Create?
You're going to do both. You're going to fill out this table so that I can see your final stuff and give you feedback before you upload it to Start Talk Create in week 7.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So fill it out here, and then whoever you're working with and I can give you feedback so you can make any final changes before week 7 when you fill out this Start Talk Create form. Okay.
And you are going to share the file with us, right? The table.
That's in your project documents that you've been working on all along.
Okay.
The final project template that you've been adding new stuff to each week. Week 1, you did a description. Week 2, you did DEI considerations. Week 3, you did the integrated performance assessment. Okay. Week 4, week 5, we're on right now with the facilitation plan. And week 6, it's right there. Okay. So it's all on that same template that you've been working on all along. And again, if you need any assistance with any of this, even though we're not meeting as a group, you can call on me and we can meet individually for further assistance. You're not on your own. Okay. And that's any questions. A couple more things.
Bethany,
Yes, yes, sir.
you mentioned speaker coming for this session,
Yep,
or?
in a couple more minutes.
Ah, okay, all right. Okay, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Just calling your attention to week 6, the final project assignment. That's where, you know, you complete your week 6 in here, and then you paste the share link into the final project assignment discussion forum so that we all can access it easily. And those of us who are providing feedback can access it in order to give you feedback. Okay. And in there, it's not showing up, but in there is also the evaluation criteria so that you can see that and make sure to follow the directions. And if you have any questions, just give me a holler. And then you can also see in week 7, the final presentation submission area. This is again in week 7, but there are the criteria by which your presentation will be judged, so you can evaluate, assessed, so that you can look at that and see what's going on here. All right. So any questions, comments, concerns?
A lot of concerns and a lot of questions, but I don't know. Bethany, is that possible you can provide us the list of the speakers for the week 7? Because I remember I put my name, I scheduled my presentation, but I don't see it in your, do you have it? Do you have access to it?
That doodle poll was just to get a consensus. That was just to get everybody's opinion on what would be a good day and time. It wasn't signing up for a particular time slot. That was just to see where the majority, what day and time the majority could meet. I will be sending out.
Just want to make sure if I am in.
Right, I'm going to send out that document after the meeting so you can sign up for a
Okay.
time slot.
Great. Thank you.
But
Okay,
also,
thank you.
yeah. Any other questions? No? All right. Let me point out, or I'm going to do 2 things. This is in my bio in the classroom, but I am going to put it in the chat. My phone number, that's my cell phone. I just put it in the chat. Write that down. If you have any questions, you can text me or call me. Okay. Or, of course, my email. If you want to set up a time to meet in Zoom next week while you're working and you have questions, or you just want to brainstorm some ideas or anything like that, reach out and we can schedule a time. Okay. And my time is really flexible. Next week, my time is really flexible. So I'm pretty wide open between the hours of 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Mountain Time, which is 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay. And I think, yay! All right. Our guest speaker is here. Victoria, please introduce your guest speaker.
Hi, so Jasper, you there? Yeah, so this is Jasper Voss, a very remarkable personality and my former student, and it's my pleasure to introduce him, and hopefully he can share some amazing ways of language learning. And I'm not myself familiar with that, so I'm really looking forward to hearing them.
Lovely, thank you. Would you mind giving a brief overview of who this group is and what you want me to talk about?
Bethany, you're gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that. That's your
Yeah. We're all language teachers. So you're here to school us on your approach. Yeah. We're all interested in all things language teaching, and your experiences will be very valuable to us in informing how we teach. So anything you'd care to share would be great.
Lovely, yeah. So let me think. I guess I'll sort of break this into two parts. One is my story, why I know Victoria, how I learned Russian, what worked for me, what didn't work, so that personal experience, and then maybe we can talk about something I know far less about, which is how to teach languages in a classroom. So yeah, about a year and a half ago, January 2023, I made the decision to dive into learning Russian, and I had learned a fair amount of Spanish before that, so I had some experience with languages, but Russian was certainly another level of removed from English and definitely far more difficult. And I think one of the biggest reasons I chose it was just wanting the challenge and wanting to see how I learned languages. I found it psychologically very interesting. So I've definitely paid attention to that throughout the process, which hopefully makes me useful here. Um, and one of the first things I did was just sort of reading a lot about how people go about learning languages. Even just on YouTube, there are people who, polyglots out there who talk all about what works for them and whatnot. And I found that very helpful. And so, yeah, I guess where I started was just ordering a book of short stories in Russian, just like very simple language, sort of designed for beginners. And I just started looking up every word. I had audio files to go with it, so I would look up every word I came across, not worrying too much that a lot of the grammar and concepts were going above my head. And I just remember sitting there, it would take hours to get through a page or two, because the alphabet was new, everything was brand new, and I could just tell that there's a lot I was missing. But I think just that exposure is really what you need at the beginning, and sort of the right mindset in terms of when you don't understand something, just moving on to the next sentence, because there are plenty of things that you can sort of grasp and start to learn a little by little. And also just, yeah, repetition at that early stage. I remember I would listen to these very short, like 3-minute stories just over and over again until, even if I didn't know what the words meant, I just knew, like, I could tell my brain knew what sounds were coming next. But that definitely, after a few weeks, got pretty boring. I could tell I wasn't learning quite as much, and it was, I could also just tell it was slow. Like, looking up every word is very slow, where you have to go into Google, and I wasn't good with the Russian keyboard, so I would very slowly type in a new word, and it just felt very clunky. So that's when I came across the website Link. I don't know if any of you guys know about that, but it is essentially a program that allows you to import any text or content or videos or audio, whatever it is, sort of language content, into their platform. And it's truly, yes, thank you. It is spelled with a Q, sort of funny. Truly brilliant for the independent learner, because you can just click on any word you don't know and it instantly shows the translation. It shows phrases and idioms that, and it has a lot of other features I'm sure I didn't use, but I don't think I could have learned as quickly without a similar program. I'm sure there are a few programs that sort of essentially do the same thing, but that's the one I used. And I think I just started importing random texts that were way above my level into this, and sort of just chipping away very slowly. I think one of the first things I did was a Chekhov story, The Lady with the Little Dog. Vika, I know we reread that in our class, which was fun. And it's this pretty dense Russian literature, and I still remember that's where I learned the words like black and white. Like I was a complete beginner, way above my head. But you have to learn those words somewhere, and so it's something about just like having this text that was very interesting to me and just persevering through it. And the other lovely thing about Russian literature is all the audiobooks are free on YouTube. So I got into this rhythm of trying to read a sentence, looking up every word I didn't know, rereading, then listening to that sentence, and sort of just, I want to put a lot of emphasis. I think something that allowed me to be fairly successful while learning independently was the sort of just how I engaged with the content, like from sentence to sentence, and really trying to, you not just looking up translations of the words, but then once you do that, rereading it and sort of trying to mentally connect, trying to sort of like get the meaning out of the Russian text, if that makes sense. I think how you engage with the context, with the content, can make a big difference when sort of integrated over the long term. And so, yeah, I was doing these sort of short stories and whatnot, finding them very challenging. Like every sentence was just felt kind of overwhelming. I could tell there was a lot of grammar I didn't know, but I was slowly starting to notice patterns. It was starting to feel a bit rewarding. And sometime around, March 2023, I think I found every Harry Potter audiobook online in Russian. And that was sort of a fantastic find. So I think I started then on the first Harry Potter book, still a complete beginner. But sort of having one, I think all the audiobooks together are probably like 150 hours or something. It's a lot of content, and it uses a lot of the same vocabulary. And so with something like Russian, or any language really, I'm sure, just having that repetition, see how words change in different contexts, I think that was extraordinarily helpful. And so I think I did the same thing, that just the sort of pattern: read a sentence, look up words, listen to the sentence while paying close attention and trying to hear the new words in context. And then just continuing that. And I think I finished the first Harry Potter book. And then what I did is I just listened to it after that, which felt like a big step. I thought there was no way I would be able to follow any of it just in Russian without looking up words. But because I just read it, I sort of remembered enough. And I think listening to that audiobook, it was only like 11 hours or something, but I think that's when I took a huge jump in my comprehension, because I remembered what they were trying to say, and therefore I had just enough to sort of piece it together and follow it as I was listening. And that was really incredible. I did a similar thing for the second book. Although I think I was, of course, also in school full time and traveling a bit that summer. So I was I did not follow the advice that plenty of people give, where they say you have to engage with the language every day. I think throughout this whole time, I took several month-long breaks completely away from it. It was sort of a side project. And then I came back in July and August and really continued engaging with it in this way of just breaking down new language, getting a lot of input. And yeah, just really focusing on input. And, I think a lot of people sort of follow this Krashen school of comprehensible input. I think I'm sure you all have thought about it much more than me, but my personal perspective is that you can't really, like, learning to speak a language doesn't help you to understand it, but learning to understand it is sort of a necessary step before you speak it. And so I kind of just followed that, especially because I was alone, didn't even have anyone to talk to. You know, I figured I may as well make progress, just getting better at understanding and see where it goes. And I was very surprised where it was a very beautiful thing where eventually it just felt like I sort of started knowing what to say. I would get like Russian words almost stuck in my head in the same way as you get a song stuck in your head or something. It was very exciting to see that. I certainly couldn't speak with any degree of fluency or it was very choppy. The grammar was horrible, but I could tell it was getting there and sort of going in the right direction. That's about when I went back to school in the fall and took a placement test, and despite never really having spoken Russian, was shocked to be placed into, what was it, Vika's 7th semester. That's how we met. And that's
It's
really
an
what,
advanced level. Yeah.
yeah, so that's really when I started speaking regularly, and it just came so quickly. Week to week, I could just tell it was getting better and better. And obviously that was because of the base I had built through all this input. Yeah, I think that's sort of my story. I've been sort of on and off sticking with Russian, just getting back into it again for the summer. And really just I don't know, for me it's about the most important thing is finding content that's interesting and then engaging with it effectively in a way that I feel like I'm making those connections that need to be made.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
So, I mean, thank you for explaining that and telling us kind of the trajectory of your learning. You started by mentioning that you began your journey just by looking up language learning tips, like how to learn a language, which I find also very valuable. Were there any particular tips or things that you read that you were like, oh, that makes sense to me, I'm going to give that a shot, or tips that you conversely thought, what is that? That is ridiculous. I will never do that. Is there anything that sticks in your mind?
Sure. I think you might not get a super satisfying answer. It's mostly just the sort of mindset of input-based learning, like letting the brain take care of it by itself if you get enough input.
Mhm.
And I really, obviously that was sort of my philosophy, and I think it has worked very well. I don't have any memory of any like one thing being sticking out as super helpful or unhelpful. I think I think it's hard to have an unhelpful tip as long as you're engaging with the language in some way and in a way that you're excited about. That's important too. I was excited about reading this literature and whatnot. And it brought me a long way, but maybe other students are more excited about, you know, studying some TV show or a movie, or, you know, as long as you're really engaged with it.
Wonderful. And so clearly you're motivated to study, which is a huge factor in learning and learning progress. And many of us are working with students who, frankly, have to be there. They
I was
don't
thinking about this.
necessarily.
I was
Go ahead.
thinking about this a lot. I knew this would come up, but yeah, sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, so, you know, we need to spend a lot of time as teachers focusing on how we perhaps increase the students' motivation to your level, you know, so that maybe it's not like they're like, oh, I can't wait to go to whatever class, but at least they are not thinking, God, I have to go to this class. I don't really want to be there. You mentioned finding content that's of interest. Do you have any other thoughts or tips on how to increase motivation or anything along those lines, since you were thinking about it already?
Definitely. Yeah, so it's very easy for me to sit here and say what works, but well, yeah, exactly what I was thinking about is that really doesn't help you teach it to students who need deadlines and assignments and as Vika discovered, I personally often feel rather suffocated and shut down when I have a lot of specific assignments, and we worked out a lovely deal so I could keep doing my own thing. But I understand that's very atypical. So yeah, how do you motivate students? I think I was sort of like I think the assignment structure unfortunately is sort of what you have to do. You know, you have to have specific things maybe every night in a beginner class or whatever it is. And I think it can be very helpful to work a degree of autonomy into that, where students are uh, searching out their own content. And an example of this, I was thinking, you know, well, how would you teach a grammar concept in a way that doesn't feel deadly boring? And, you know, so in Russian, maybe you're learning about a new case ending, and just something that came to mind. Maybe every student searches out some text that they want to study and it's their own. And when you teach that grammar concept, their homework could be like, go find 10 examples of the accusative case in this text or something. And everyone can come in with, you know, different texts highlighted. But I don't know. I think I might be the wrong person to ask because I value autonomy so much, and I'm not sure that's the case for the average student. So take my advice with a grain of salt. I don't know.
No, that's great. Also, I'm going to ask one more thing, and then I'm hoping other people, while I'm yammering on, will come up with questions for you as well. I notice you happen to be a deductive learner rather than an inductive learner. Are you familiar with those phrases?
I'm not, no.
So you mentioned pattern recognition. Pattern recognition is a deductive strategy. Instead of people telling you, here is the rule, you look at a bunch of examples and deduce the rule for yourself.
Sure. I'm realizing now I should have clarified this sort of common, like, do you teach grammar or do you get grammar through context? I would like going right at the beginning. I knew Russian had 6 cases and they might sort of show up in these contexts. I found reading about the grammar helpful to an extent, but just like 5 minutes here and there where you sort of know what's going on and then you go look for it. So I certainly didn't just like figure it all out on my own. Anyway, sorry, you can go ahead.
No. It's a great strategy. It's one that doesn't get used often, especially in higher ed. We tend to teach more top down than bottom up. But for a variety of reasons I won't go into. But for people who are motivated, like I'm a pattern searcher as well. And I think many students could benefit from that. So it was nice to hear you talking about it as an example, because asking students to go find patterns, to recognize patterns, to identify things and label them themselves, instead of us saying, here's the pattern, learn this idea, you know, it can be a real motivating thing for students who wouldn't otherwise be excited to be there, you know, like
Sure.
it's sleuthing, if you want to call it that, or whatever mindset. It's more engaging than the alternate approach. So I was glad to hear you say that, because I'm a big fan of that kind of teaching and learning. Pattern and scaffolding, and that was the other thing. Thank you for mentioning that you were that because you were already familiar, and I think this shouldn't be underestimated as a valuable approach. You are already familiar with the text, and through your familiarity of that text, when you listen to it in a different language, you were anticipating what was coming, and that was helping provide the context for you to have more clues to attach meaning to words that and phrases that you didn't already know.
Precisely.
That can be extremely valuable.
Yeah, it actually wasn't even that I had listened, I knew it in a different language. I had read it entirely in Russian and then went back and, without having a dictionary in front of me, just listened to it. And so I had already seen every single sentence I was listening to. And that was, I think, that stands out to me as the one single most valuable activity I did.
Jasper, are you saying you've never read Harry Potter in English?
No, I did when I was little, of course, but I didn't know like I didn't have every sentence by heart, so to speak.
But you did have an element of content anticipation.
Yes, definitely
Recognition.
context.
Wonderful. Who else has a question for our wonderful guest speaker who is bringing us some seriously valuable information and ideas? Questions? Questions for Jasper?
Yes.
Please, Jamil, go ahead.
Jasper, you know, part of motivation that we are working on in our program, and you are a guest, you very appreciated coming and sharing with us. Do you think that your background language as Germanic, Deutsch, that gives you a push to go for Russian language and not other language, or that could be like kind of motivation because you have a lot in common, I guess?
I
What
don't
do you
think so.
think? Yeah.
No, I think there was no real reason to choose Russian. I'm just a native English speaker, and have no connection to. I grew up in America. My family's American. I really have no connection to it. It was mostly a cultural interest, I suppose. I certainly chose the language because I was interested in it, but it wasn't anything deeper.
Thank you.
What other questions for Jasper?
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Jasper, it seems that you learned in an immersion approach. You immerse yourself in the target language, and when you took the placement test in the college, and you are placed at the advanced level, right?
That's right.
How about you are placed at intermediate level? Okay, let's just imagine you are placed at the intermediate level, and your teacher use how should I? Okay, non-immersion approach. So the way she teaches is very different from the way you learn.
Mhm.
How will you get used to your teacher's teaching?
Interesting. In a way, this sort of happened because I took the placement test, and of course, my speaking wasn't great. But the professor I met with, the head of the department, said, "You can either go into advanced or intermediate. I recommend you go to both classes and see which would be better for you." And so I did go to the intermediate class and had that exact experience where it was this very structured environment and lists of vocabulary that didn't feel important to me, and all this. And quite honestly, I don't think I could have learned from that class. Perhaps I was too deep down my own rabbit hole, but I just knew that it wasn't going to work for me, and I would much rather either take a more advanced class that was more conversational and reading based, which was what I ended up doing. Thank you, Victoria. It was lovely. Or just continue on my own because I felt like I was making good progress and I didn't want to be hindered by this excessive structure that didn't feel tailored to what I needed.
Yeah, I totally agree. Interest is the best teacher, really.
This is true.
It reminds me how I could find some, visually compelling kind of textbook to pass my GMP exam. Yeah, because it's only for the words and even under with the instruction-led classes. Sometimes it can put us, to sleep. You really have to be like an
Yeah.
active learner. Yeah,
Yep.
drive a car by yourself. Yes.
Yeah.
Just for one more question.
Sure.
Do you think, okay, because I'm going to teach the beginning learners, so do you think I can use the way you learn Russian to teach my students? Okay, I just give them short stories and then have them read, and then, the way you learn Russian. I'll use your way to teach my students. What do you think?
I think you can definitely I mean, I know nothing about how you teach now, but let's say you have a very traditional model, sort of, I think you can definitely go more in my direction. I think the students would need a lot of guidance in order to not feel overwhelmed, if I'm being realistic. I think throwing them into new content and expecting them to figure it out on their own certainly would not work. But I think a big opportunity that's missed in the lower level classes is taking a step back from the language itself and teaching people about how to think about learning languages, how to engage with content, um, sort of, you know, and I think it's a skill that can be learned. And in intro classes, it's a great opportunity to sort of like take a story that's a bit above your beginner student's level and maybe try to teach them how to break it down. How should I look up words? And also just there's a bit of a philosophy to it where my personal experience is that you have to be really careful at the beginning to not get overwhelmed or hung up on details. And I basically developed the rule for myself that like I read a sentence, try to understand it, and even if it makes no sense, I just move on to the next one, because it's like it's so easy to waste time in the details when you have a whole language to learn and others, and you'll fill in what you need to learn when the time is right. But I think, yeah, as for what to do in a classroom, I would really like to see more instruction just about language acquisition in general. I think a lot of students feel lost and feel like they have to, all it is memorizing a list or memorizing endings on words. And in my experience, that played no role in it at all. I never tried to study vocabulary. I never tried to memorize words. I just sort of went for this immersion approach, and you see the common words over and over again enough that they just start sticking. So that's I guess that's my one message. No, you shouldn't throw students into only advanced content, as I sort of did to myself, but there's a great opportunity to teach them to engage with content effectively.
It's really well said. We definitely could do that better. And I mean, I won't speak for everybody, but with the teachers that I've worked with in the past, I've known that we could always do a better job at helping learners figure out how to learn better, whatever the content is that we're teaching, whether it be language or math or science or whatever it is, that helping them understand how to approach it is just as important as the content itself.
Yeah. I think that could even be like, I could completely envision a week or two of lectures only in English or whatever, you know, where you're just talking about, even there's some very good YouTube channels of just people talking about their experience learning languages. Getting students engaging with that kind of stuff, I think could really shape their mindset in a way that could be helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And plus you highlighted for us something that we don't often do, but that some students will respond really well to. And you referred to it several times. You jumped into a book that most beginning teachers would never assign their students. You're a beginner student and you jumped into Harry Potter, or you jumped into what would be considered upper intermediate level content. And you know, we have these graded readers like, oh, you know, I was assigned a graded reader for Chinese where it's the 500, you know, breakthrough words or something like that. And it's like, oh, okay, I have the patience because I like text. And so I'm fine with that. But I, in my own experiments, always go for novels and other things that, well, actually like history and sociology and other stuff, but in the target language. And that's where I spend my time, even though most teachers would say, don't start there, that's too overwhelming. But some of us, that's what we respond to better. And others, they like the graded readers where they feel less overwhelmed. So it's good to see that side of the story, your side of the story as well.
I think it all comes down to the student's willingness to just move on when you don't get something, and
Yeah.
try to glean what insight you can from what's in front of you. And I mean, like, yeah, I truly get, I would like click on every word in a sentence to see what each word meant. And it's like, none of the grammar, but if you see every word that's in a sentence, you can piece together what it's trying to say. It's not rocket science.
Oh, any other questions for Jasper? We're in on the end of our, we're 2 minutes past. I apologize in advance for holding you all up. Any last questions for Jasper? All right. Okay. Well, Jasper, thank you so much for you are our final speaker of our final live session.
Wow.
This class. So you have helped us end on a high note. Thank you so much for that. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. Yeah.
Yeah, and have a wonderful rest of your language learning journey. And everybody else, thank you so much. We are officially closed or ended. I'll hang out in case you have any questions, but that's all I have. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Just for listening. Yeah.